Kia ora ngā mihi nui ki koutou katoa, e ngā mana whenua ki tēnei rohi, taranaki whānui to upuka te ika, tēnā koutou katoa. E ngā mana here ana hoa e whā, nau mai, haere mai ki whanganui a tara, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koe Hanako. Some of you won't know, Hanako and I used to play on the same rugby team. That's an unlikely statement to make, isn't it? But a true one, I have to say, as well. Hanako can give you the background on how that all came to pass. But it is a true story. Actually, it's amazing to look out in this audience. Some days, when I think about the role that I now play and I think about kind of where I've come from, and when I scan my eyes down the list of who was going to be here today, it features various associates and villains of my past. Yeah, there's a lot of people here who know way too much about me, but I know that Gareth McMillan played Bill Sykes in Oliver against my Mr. Brownlow, and you know, he went on into the arts and did stuff, didn't he? I went into politics. That's probably tells you that performance and how it went. And Anna Cameron's here, and she and I both know about the creatively excellent but financially challenged capping show of 1993 in Dunedin. And if anyone ever asks either of us, it broke even. 100%, that's what it looked like in the accounts at the end, I can assure you of that. And look, there's heaps of other people here. Tama Waipara is here, and he knows way too much about what I was doing in New York in the late 90s and early 2000s. But it is as Ronald Reagan used to say, mutually assured destruction, Tama. That's all I'll say. But kia ora tātou, it is terrific to be here, and thanks to Creative New Zealand Toi Aotearoa for their very warm welcome to us this morning. My job is to say a few things this morning, but I want to pick up on the theme of today's hui, and that is around weaving the threads. Because for me, I get to be the Associate Minister of Arts, Culture and Heritage, which is a fantastic job. I also get to be the Minister of Sport and Recreation. So far we're doing the two things that I'm really passionate about, but the third of my roles I'm also passionate about, which is being the Minister of Finance, as Stephen said, Minata ki Pūtea. And my job most recently has been to put together our first wellbeing budget. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Richard Benj, for leading the cheering there, well done. It is, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it today because I don't have a limited amount of time and I want to talk about specific matters for the arts and creative sector. But the context is exactly that, which is that as a country, we, I believe, have an enormous opportunity to value broadly what matters to New Zealanders. And for a long period of time, when it's come to budgets, that has simply been an exercise in measuring GDP and GDP growth. And many of you will know the old sayings about what GDP measures, but in my budget speech I used the Robert Kennedy quote, which is around the fact that he lists all of the things it measures, including, you know, bombs and wars and ambulances and all these things, and then lists all the things it doesn't measure, which includes things like the beauty of our poetry and the strength of our marriages and so forth and so on. And finishes by saying, in short, it measures everything, nothing that makes life worthwhile. And so what we wanted to do with this budget was begin to value and to measure all that makes life worthwhile in our country. And so we've done that with a whole interesting framework, which essentially is about, yes, we want to be a prosperous nation, but we want to care about who shares in that prosperity. We want that prosperity to be sustainable. And so from now on, our budgets are about money, yes, but they're also about our people, our environment, and our communities. And everything we do from now on goes through that lens. So when we're making decisions about what to invest in, it is on that broad framework. When we're measuring our success, it is on that broad framework. And it will not escape anyone in the room that the arts and creative sector are integral and core to that exercise. We cannot have well-being in our country if we're not fulfilled as people, and we cannot be fulfilled as people if we are not in touch with our creative side, and with the others in our community who have that approach. So you are integral to that, and I want you to know that. Now, that doesn't mean we've got it sorted yet as to how we capture what the arts and creative sectors do. And so a lot of work is now going on, and in my case via the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and Creative New Zealand, to make sure that what you do is captured in that framework and in that understanding of what matters and what we value. And so I urge you to engage in that process over the coming years as we build out that definition of well-being. But I do want you to know that you sit at the heart of that. Again, I'm not going to spend time on it, but I also acknowledge that I hope the sectors we've attached ourselves to in this first wellbeing budget around mental health, child wellbeing, making sure we adjust well to the future of work, supporting Māori and Pacifica aspirations are ones that you also see the sector's connection to as well, and I hope you'll be able to understand why we went there in our very first wellbeing budget. But in terms of our work in this sector, I do just want to lay the story out, because you all like stories. So in Budget 2018, we did a budget that we called our Foundations for the Future budget. And that was a question of coming into government after a decade of underinvestment in most things in our society. And we had to really relay the foundations. So for example, we did put a lot of money into the Ministry of Culture and Heritage because they were simply unable to do their job as the organiser of the government's role within this sector. For example, they had a computer system that meant they could not email the Treasury. This is a flaw if you want to get money. So in some kind of mad performance art piece, they used to run emails down the road and deliver them to the Treasury because they couldn't interact with a secure computer system. We rectified that. So we built the foundations, similarly with Heritage New Zealand as well in that first budget. And so I know expectations are raised and they're high, but you have to have a foundation to build from. And that's what we were doing in 2018. There was some specific funding in 2018. The New Zealand Music Industry Commission got a boost. And for me, when I watched the Chills be awarded one of the South by Southwest awards, knowing that we had put more money in to support artists to get across there was a real excitement for us. And so seeing the Music Industry Commission able to develop that was good. So then we come to Budget 2019, the wellbeing budget. And I want to talk today specifically about a couple of announcements that are within that budget, but I also want to acknowledge that we have again gone back to the building of the foundations for what we need to do. So just down the road here, we finally gave Te Papa a proper funding increase that they haven't had for many years, a $50 million increase to actually mean they can build their infrastructure up and build from there. And so I'm really pleased that we were able to do that. The New Zealand Screen Production Fund gets another boost. This is the New Zealand Screen Production Fund as opposed to the international one, which also got a boost as well. Ngā Taonga, which does such tremendous work for us in our audio-visual archive, but again, had suffered from underfunding for a long time, gets a boost in this budget. There's additional funding for New Zealand On Air and Te Māngai Pāho. There's additional funding for Radio New Zealand. We are building up the institutions that support us in making sure that we can deliver to our wellbeing objectives. But you will have heard from the Prime Minister, who incidentally sends her apologies to you today. There is a funny story attached to that around whether or not her or I came to speak at this conference. She spoke to you last year, and she didn't speak to a group of farmers who are having a big event called Field Days last year. So my theory is you got in first, so when it rotates around next year, you'll get her back. That's my theory anyway, but you get me for today. But she sends her apologies to you today. But you will have heard her talk about the importance for us of sustainable careers within the creative sector. And obviously that's what all of you and your organisations are about. And we've been working within the Ministry of Culture and Heritage on that work, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also I want to acknowledge that Creative New Zealand and New Zealand On Air have been working in this area as well. And they recently produced some research called A Profile of Creative Professionals, which many of you are in, and also many of you, I'm sure, will have read. And I guess what it told us is what we know anecdotally, which is that it's challenging to make a living as an artist in New Zealand. It's rewarding, obviously, but there are massive barriers in a small country such as New Zealand to making that living. So what can we do about it? Well, this report tells us that we need to look at three things: fair reward for the work that's done, making creative careers sustainable, and finding better ways to support emerging creative professionals. And so it is in those three areas that we are furthering our work around what a sustainable career looks like. And I know Stephen is going to talk to you a little bit more in a moment about the work that Creative New Zealand is doing there. So we've identified those three things, and you can legitimately say to us, well, what are you going to do about it? And we're making our first steps in this budget, but there are many further steps to go forward. I want to talk about two of the initiatives the government has put forward. The first is that Budget 2019 delivers an additional $4 million in new funding to Creative New Zealand, which they are then matching, to enable arts practitioners funded through the Creative New Zealand Arts Grants program to actually be paid a fair wage. Now, what that means is that Creative New Zealand set the rates, will do the contract, so it's not the government. But I can tell you that the expectation of the government, having put this money in, is that it will be in excess of the living wage for all of those arts grants contracted funding. That's important to us because it is a first step towards recognising that we need to do better in the way that we reward and pay those who are funded. So that is our contribution in this budget, matched by Creative New Zealand, and we believe it'll make a big difference as we move forward. The second initiative is what is called the Creatives in Schools program, and this is building on the old Artists in Schools program. For those of you who have, and if you haven't, you should, had the privilege of watching Luke Beringer's Heart of the Matter documentary, you'll know that New Zealand has a rich history of having supported within the education system creativity in the arts. In the scheme that was run out of the first Labor government, which Gordon Tovey picked up and trained people for, we had artists like Ralph Hoteri and Cliff Whiting and Para Matchett who were actually part of a scheme that enabled artists to be in schools, not only supporting the children but supporting teachers to develop programs and curriculum up. So in this budget we re-established that with a $7 million start to enabling creative learning experiences in our schools. This will be intensive work. The programs will be 8 to 20-week programs. We have to start, we will roll it out in schools from the beginning of next year. But again, it is our first step to reconfirming the importance of creativity within our schooling system and providing an opportunity for artists to be able to take on new and challenging and different roles, develop their craft and be part of that exciting opportunity. And so I look forward to the way that that will help further develop sustainable careers as well. We undertook, as part of our policy program, to be looking at what happened to PACE and what we can do in the future to be able to support sustainable careers. The policy work on that is moving forward. It's an important process for us to look at whatever the 21st century version is of PACE, because there were great elements of that scheme, but in particular what people appreciated not only was not having to deal with the work test requirements, but also the fact that there were programs alongside it that supported people to develop plans for how they would make a sustainable career. And I want to acknowledge the work of Anthony Deaker down in Dunedin and others who developed those sorts of programs. The policy work on what the next stage of that is underway, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming months. Alongside these sustainability elements is how we ensure we get a broader reach into these programs. And within the budget, we've got another 4 years of what's called the Regional Culture and Heritage Fund. It's the fund that supports regional museums largely. So a new 4-year allocation of $23 million kicks off from the 1st of July 2019, and I expect there will be the usual deluge of applications for that. But also, I'm very pleased to announce today, on behalf of Creative New Zealand, their new Arts in the Regions initiative. For 3 years, from 2019 to 2022, this scheme is aimed at increasing access for local and regional communities outside of Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. It has a clear purpose of increasing opportunities and engagement for local and regional communities to experience high quality arts, increasing investment in the arts by local or regional partners, and developing high quality arts practitioners within local and regional communities. The focus on access will be complemented by the changes to Creative New Zealand's Creative Communities schemes, and Creative New Zealand will boost its total investment in that scheme to $4 million per year. This is a good way of taking out another message of the government to support thriving regions. So my congratulations to Creative New Zealand for focusing into that area and supporting other initiatives within our regional framework. So that's the basis that we're moving forward on. Setting the foundations in 2018, moving to a wellbeing approach that values all that we do in New Zealand and finding a place in that for the creative sector, and beginning to address those issues of fairly rewarding, reaching out into our communities, finding places for emerging professionals, and ultimately creating sustainable careers in the arts and creative sector. These are the first steps. Budget 20 will do more, and touch wood, as we carry on, we'll be able to develop it even further so that we truly put arts and creativity at the heart of the matter. Kia ora tātou.